If everyone will take their seats.
So, opening statements. One from the Navy and Marine Corps, and one from the Air Force.
The hearing will come to order. The subcommittee meets today to review the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force Aviation Investment and Modernization budget requests for fiscal year 2018. I would like to welcome our distinguished panel of witnesses. We have Vice Admiral Paul Grosklags, Commander of the Navy Air Systems Command, Rear Admiral Chip Miller, Director of the Navy's Air Warfare Division, Lieutenant General Arnold Bunch, Military Deputy in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition. We have Lieutenant General Jerry Harris, Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans, Programs, and Requirements. And we have Lieutenant General John Davis, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Aviation. I understand that this will be General Davis's final appearance before the committee because he will be retiring next month. General Davis, we want to thank you for your 37 years of distinguished service to the Marine Corps and our nation, and we wish you the best in your future plans. And I want you to know that I know everyone on this committee has greatly appreciated the assistance that you have provided us because you give us not only just a perspective on what we should be doing, but also your work has been incredibly inspirational. So thank you for your work.
My honor, sir. Thanks.
I also like to thank all of you for your service and look forward to your testimony today. As I've stated at previous hearings, I support the President's commitment to rebuilding the capacity and capability of our military. However, I am concerned that the current budget request of merely $603 billion for the Department of Defense will not achieve that goal in the timeline desired and needed. For example, at Congress's request, the military services submitted their unfunded requirements list to the Congressional Defense Committees last week. The total was over $30 billion. A significant portion of these requests were related to modernization needs. Of particular note, the Air Force included an additional 14 F-35A aircraft, and the Navy and Marine Corps included 20 additional aircraft comprised of F-18 Super Hornets, F-35Bs, and F-35Cs. I suspect that all the witnesses today will support the President's budget request. However, members of this subcommittee need to better understand what additional capabilities are required above the President's request and why it is an imperative we work to fully resource these unfunded requirements to accelerate the restoration of full spectrum readiness. I continue to support Chairman Thornberry and Chairman McCain, who believe that a $640 billion budget in fiscal year 2018 is required to build the capability needed for today's complex and dangerous world. The military services unfunded requirements also validate a higher top-line funding level. Today, the subcommittee will review a broad portfolio of tactical aviation modernization programs and associated acquisition strategies. The witnesses have been asked to identify their top 5 modernization requirements and briefly summarize how the budget request addresses them. The aviation budgets for the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force appear to be placing a higher priority on current readiness, and rightly so. Earlier this year, we heard the Vice Chief of Naval Operations report that over 60%, I'm going to say that over again, 60% of F-18s are out of service due to backlogs in depot repair. The budget fully funds depot capacity. This budget also robustly funds preferred aviation munitions, such as the Joint Direct Attack Munition, small diameter bombs, and Hellfire missiles. A much-needed increase, especially for the ongoing combat operations in the U.S. Central Command's area of responsibility. However, the Navy continues to absorb the significant risk in its management of the strike fighter inventory. The Navy is challenged to replace legacy F-18C, D, and AV-8B aircraft that have reached the end of their life service before they can be replaced by new F-35s or new F-18 Super Hornet aircraft. Each year, the Navy flies about 180,000 flying hours in its F-18 fleet, which equates to the entire fleet expending 24 to 36 aircraft worth of service life per year. The Navy's fiscal year 2018 budget request includes the procurement of 38 F-18 Super Hornets and F-35, so the Navy is only slightly above its annual expenditure of fighter aircraft life. There are 2 less Navy F-35Cs in the budget request than were projected last year, and the future year's defense program for fiscal year 2018 reduces the planned F-35C procurements by 7 aircraft. The Air Force currently has a fleet of 55 combat-coded fighter squadrons, significantly smaller than the Desert Storm Force of 134 fighter squadrons. We have heard testimony from senior Air Force leaders that with the current demand for rotational fighter presence, 55 combat fighter squadrons do not allow sufficient time to train pilots, maintain aircraft, which contributes to degraded full-spectrum readiness. The 55 combat squadron level meets the minimum requirements set forth in the current defense planning guidance, but the Air Force considers it to be high risk in many challenging scenarios. The Air Force has stated that in order to meet current steady-state demands and maintain readiness to meet surge requirements, the Air Force needs to grow at least 60 combat fighter squadrons, invest in munitions, modernize existing platforms, and increase participation in advanced training programs. The fiscal year 2018 budget request includes 45 F-35As for the Air Force, and that number is 2 more than planned last year for this budget request. However, I would also note that 2 years ago, the Air Force planned to procure 60 F-35As in the fiscal year 2018. In testimony before this committee last July, Air Force General Hawk Carlisle, the former commander of Air Combat Command, testified that to address the Air Force's capability and capacity shortfalls, the desired production rate is 60 F-35s per year, not the 46 that this request includes. The committee is also pleased to see the Air Force reverse its decision to retire the U-2 in 2019 and provide funding to maintain both the U-2 and Global Hawk platforms to meet high-altitude airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance demands for our combat commanders. However, all of the service represented today need to take a hard look at their investment strategies in airborne ISR capacity because a significant portion of combat commanders' requirements are still unmet in many of the intelligence disciplines. As the committee continues its deliberations on the fiscal year 2018 budget request, we will look for opportunities to further address the service's most promising and pressing modernization requirements. So as you know, that's an incredibly depressing list of gaps that is going to be the focus of our hearing today. It's unusual actually for this long of an opening statement, but I think each of those elements were important to set the stage for the testimony that we're going to be receiving today. Because we're not just focused on what you're going to accomplish and what you've been requesting, but the gap of what needs to be there and how it has been falling short and what we're losing as a result of that continuing gap. And with that, I would like to turn to my good friend and colleague from Massachusetts, Nikki Tsongas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you for your service, and especially General Davis, we wish you well in your retirement. It's been a pleasure to work with you. The budget request for Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps programs in our jurisdiction reflects a more stable funding path for major aviation programs and seeks to address modernization upgrades needed by all 3 services. This committee has rightfully focused on areas where improvements are needed in the acquisition process, but there are a number of successes that don't get much attention, but promise to deliver greatly improved capabilities in some key areas in the next few years for the services. Our witnesses today and the thousands of people that work in acquisition for the services should be commended for that. That being said, there are areas of concern with some of the programs being reviewed by the subcommittee today, and it is our responsibility to make sure our service members get the best possible equipment and to see that taxpayer funds are wisely spent. Today's hearing will have to cover a lot of ground, but I wanted to make 2 quick points prior to our hearing from our witnesses. The first is my continued concern with the rate of physiological events plaguing the Navy's aviation community in the FA-18 Hornet and T-45 trainer aircraft fleets. While I know the Navy is working hard and looking at lots of options in this area, the rates remain at a very high rate in some cases, and in the case of the T-45C, the Navy hasn't been able to conduct student pilot flights since early April, a more than 2-month pause in critical training for our future aviators. I look forward to getting an update on the issue and to hearing about how the several efforts underway are addressing the problem. I also have some questions about areas for Air Force and Navy collaboration to solve these issues. My second concern is with the significant cost growth reflected in the budget request for several important programs for each of the services. In each case, there are significant increases compared to last year's projections for fiscal year 18. The programs in question include 1, the Air Force's Next Generation Air Dominance Program, which shows a significant increase from $21 million in fiscal year 17 to $294 million in fiscal year 18. Second, the Navy's Next Generation Jammer Program, which shows an $89 million increase in fiscal year 18. The F-35 program that shows a $500 million increase in fiscal year 18 to finish development, and the CH-53K program that shows a $107 million increase in fiscal year 18. All of these are very important programs, so I'd like to fully understand the reasons for the proposed growth as part of the subcommittee's review of the fiscal year 18 budget. And with that, I yield back.
Without objection, all witnesses' prepared statements will be included into the hearing record. Our presenters will be Admiral Grosklags and General Bunch. We'll begin with the Admiral.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Tsongas, distinguished members of the subcommittee, appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to talk about naval aviation programs. Our 2018 President's Budget Submission is governed by Secretary of Defense's priorities to improve warfighting readiness by addressing pressing programmatic shortfalls that have accrued from 15 years of wartime operational tempo and chronic underfunding of many of our readiness accounts. The budget request is designed to maintain the operational effectiveness of our current force while also building a bridge to growing the future force starting in 2019. Current readiness of our naval aviation forces is clearly less than it needs to be. The fiscal year 2017 enacted budget provided much needed increases in funding for many of our naval aviation readiness accounts. Our fiscal year 2018 request builds on 2017 with a request for funding of these readiness accounts that both in real terms and as a percent of the requirement is at a level not seen in 8 to 10 years. Support for these accounts is the most important single lever in returning our fleet to the required levels of readiness. Close behind that is the need to continue and in some cases accelerate the procurement of new aircraft. This includes F-35s, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, for both the Marine Corps and the Navy, and additional F-18 Super Hornets for the Navy. As we continue to struggle with extending the service life and maintaining the readiness of our legacy F-18s, both services are working to accelerate the transition to other aircraft. In addition to the F-35B and C models, critical priorities for the Marine Corps include initiation and ramp-up of the CH-53K production, completing procurement of the KC-130J, execution of the V-22 Common Configuration Readiness and Modernization Initiative, and initiation of the MAGTAF's Expeditionary Unmanned Air System. Each of these priorities is a key contributor to the Marine Corps' capability and capacity to meet both O-plans and combatant commander requirements. On the Navy side of the house, in addition to the F-18s and F-35s that I mentioned, pushing forward with the MQ-4 Triton procurement, awarding a development contract for the MQ-25 carrier-based unmanned tanker aircraft, continuing on-track development of the next-gen jammer system, and fielding of the long-range anti-ship missile on both the B-1 and the F-18 Super Hornet are our priorities. We will continue to leverage every tool and opportunity available to drive down the cost of each of these programs. This subcommittee has been very supportive of our efforts in the past, and we are again asking for your support for initiatives such as the F-35 block buy and a third V-22 multi-year program supporting the final 7 years of planned Marine, Navy, and Air Force procurements. Separate from the procurement focus, as mentioned by Ranking Member Tsongas, this subcommittee is very aware of the continued challenges we face in resolving the high rate of physiological episodes that we have seen in our T-45s and our F-18s. It bears repeating that this is naval aviation's #1 safety issue, and we continue to approach root cause assessment and near-term mitigation steps from an unconstrained resources perspective. As we continue to assess potential root causes, in parallel, we are focused on implementation of aircrew alerting and protection systems so that we can resume student training in our T-45s and continue mitigation of risks for our F-18 aircrew. Naval aviation's priorities are directly tied to increasing worldwide security challenges. Our ability to achieve the improved readiness, the increased capacity, and the enhanced capabilities required to deal with these challenges remains constrained by the overall resourcing constraints imposed by the Budget Control Act and the often inefficient use of resources driven by seemingly chronic extended execution under continuing resolutions. You have our commitment to making the best possible use of the resources we are given. We ask this subcommittee's continued support in working to eliminate these barriers. We want to thank you again for your continued support of our sailors and Marines, and we look forward to addressing your questions.
General Bunch.
Thank you, Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Songus, and other members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to appear before you today. We appreciate your service, and the support this subcommittee provides the United States Air Force, our airmen, and their families. For the past 70 years, from the evolution of the jet aircraft to the advent of the ICBM satellite-guided bombs, remotely piloted aircraft, and many other accomplishments, your Air Force has been breaking barriers as a member of the finest joint warfighting team on the planet. For the last 27 of those 70 years, we have been in continuous combat. During this period, we employed air power in ways never envisioned and delivered unparalleled support to the combatant commanders, our sister services, allies, and coalition partners. While providing this unmatched operational capability, budget realities have taken a toll on our ability to provide for the future joint force. These many years of combat have taught us much, most importantly that the demand for air power has grown in every mission, in every domain, and in every location. The world has watched your Air Force operate, and the world has adapted. Our adversaries have adapted their capabilities to strike at areas we depend on to execute our missions, adapted their defenses to reduce our ability to employ our forces, and adopted many of our tactics and techniques, all of which reduce our ability to employ our forces. Today, we face a world of ever-improving adversaries, increasing threats, and a persistent war against violent extremism. This changing environment of increasing demands and commitments, along with a limited pool of resources to address issues and the threat of the Budget Control Act, make our mission of providing unmatched global vigilance, global reach, and global power ever more challenging. The result of these changes is a marked decrease in our technological advantage. Where I once would have said we had a decided advantage on all fronts, today I can say we retain our lead in some technological areas. However, in other areas, our potential adversaries are nipping at our heels or are shoulder to shoulder with us. To address the shrinking technology gap, we must continue to invest in science and technology and modernize our forces to ensure our most valued treasure, America's sons and daughters, has a decisive advantage when we send them into harm's way. We do not want a fair fight. The FY18 budget we submitted is the best balance of our readiness and modernization we could achieve within the physical constraints we face. We take this balanced approach seriously as we must be ready for today while simultaneously preparing for tomorrow's challenges. The budget request you receive continues our emphasis on recovering readiness, filling critical gaps, and improving lethality. The budget invests heavily in airmen, readiness, nuclear deterrence operations, space and cyber capabilities, combat air forces, and infrastructure. It supports the in-strength growth we need to start to address combatant commanders' requirements while also focusing on pilot production, a national crisis for us. We continue to maintain and modernize the nuclear enterprise while also prioritizing the resiliency, future capabilities, and modernization of our space domain to operate in increasingly contested environments. The budget also supports research, development, and fielding of game-changing technologies. As a department, we had to make tough choices in balancing capability, capacity, and readiness while focusing on modernizing weapons systems and infrastructure. These decisions were not made easily or taken lightly, highlighting that unfulfilled requirements remain. As you are aware, the budgetary needs of the United States Air Force exceed projected top-line funding as demand for our Air Force capabilities currently far exceeds our supply. Uncertainty looms over the department as sequestration and the Budget Control Act caps return with this year's budget. Budget stability remains vital, and relief of the Budget Control Act limits is necessary for the Air Force to realize its long-term strategy and meet today's and tomorrow's demands. If the law does not allow relief, it could lead to a repeat of the negative consequences of sequestration seen in FY13. We request your engagement and assistance to ensure we do not go down that path again. General Harris and I look forward to answering the committee's questions today. Thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, gentlemen. Luckily, everyone in this subcommittee and our committee are opposed to CRs and sequestration, so we all have the same theme and are working in the same direction. We're going to have votes on the House floor. So we have somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour in order to accomplish everyone having an answer to a question. We're going to limit the time for a question and answer to 3 minutes so we can get to everyone. We did this last time. It seemed to work pretty effectively. We're doing it for the ranking member and the chair also. I would appreciate if you would assist us in giving both complete but also short answers. I think within that 3-minute time period, if we get to a point where someone's got to elaborate, certainly we can continue. But my question goes to General Davis, Admiral Miller, and General Harris, and this is where you get to do a commercial. I appreciate everything that you've said about the budget as submitted, but we are very concerned about the unfunded mandates. As we know, the Navy and Marine Corps, over 60% of the Department of Navy F-18s cannot fly. The Air Force says it's the oldest worst equipped in history that we've had. There's $3.9 billion that's asked for. General Davis, Admiral Miller, General Harris, if we put that $3.9 million back, can you tell us what we get and what we miss if we don't? General Davis.
Sir, those are F-35s, both Bs and Cs. They're V-22s, C-130s, V-22s, H-1 Zulu attack helicopters, and some OSA, or Operational Support Aircraft, airframes. Absolutely, positively have to have that new inventory on the line. As we said, the numbers in the 60%, but today I could fly get 91 F-18s airborne. I've got 171 requirement. That's so if you looked at that, 75% mission capable rate, I should have 128 that you should be able to fly in a given day. So roughly, we're 27 short today, this morning. That's 3 squadrons worth of airplanes. So bottom line is it's an imperative for us to recapitalize the force to get the new metal on the line, and that additional money will allow us to do that.
Admiral?
Yes, sir. Should additional funds above the President's budget be made available, the Navy's FY18 unfunded priority list predominantly accelerates the recovery and the readiness and wholeness of the entire fleet, which was the premise of the 18 budget. What you'll notice on that Navy's unfunded priority list is aircraft procurement are at the top of the list, specifically with strike fighters, F-18s and F-35s. So those additional 10 aircraft for the F-18s and 4 aircraft for the F-35s replenish combat-worn aircraft to reduce near-term strike fighter shortfalls and address long-term inventory deficits. As you know, we're fighting inventory management issues. These aircraft absolutely address that. For the F-35 specifically, it also accelerates our squadron transition plan and gets much-needed 5th-generation capability onto our aircraft carriers. Lower in the unfunded priority list, you'll notice some enabler accounts, the things that we talk about that are key to readiness, spares, logistics, and support. We were unable to fully fund to 100% those accounts. The unfunded priority list does that for us. Thank you.
General Harris.
Sir, first on our list would be readiness, and that gets at the airmen that we need to support and make sure that we have the growth for the Air Force based on the tasks given to us. The priority of those would be in our maintenance, our operations, and also our acquisition forces. The Readiness Modernization portion of that, it's the additional F-35s to get us to 60 per year, which we think is a minimum to get after the 5th-gen requirements that we have. You'll also see some for nuclear deterrent ops to include our NC-3 operations and our ability to command and control our nuclear forces, along with space and improving what we're doing on orbit, both in our defenses and our SBIRS satellites. So it is a large spectrum, but at the bottom of that list, or still on the list, is the infrastructure, because for a long time we have been cutting back on our infrastructure improvements and our ability to launch the power projection areas that we need within our Air Force.
Ms. Zongas?
Thank you. I appreciate in your testimony, Admiral Grosklags, that you mentioned the efforts you're putting into addressing the physiological episodes. But as of today, it has been 2 months since normal training operations using the T-45 trainer aircraft were underway at Kingsville, Meridian, and Pensacola Naval Air Stations. So this is clearly a major problem for the Navy, and the long-term impact will certainly be more pronounced the longer issues with the trainers persist. So without a reliable flow of new pilots and naval flight officers, the Navy will be in serious trouble from a personnel standpoint in the future. So in that regard, I have 2 questions about possible ways forward. First, assuming this problem continues for some time, are there non-T-45 aircraft options for getting this training accomplished? If so, what are they? Can Air Force aircraft be used for at least some of the training syllabus? And can the training with the T-45 be cut back and then made up later in an aviator's career. So that's one. Second, several of the aviators our staff spoke with asked the Navy to take a serious look at changing at least some T-45 aircraft back to a liquid oxygen-based system for providing breathing air to the crew. And they pointed out that the original British version of the aircraft did use such a system. So is the Navy looking at this option for T-45s? How might this time and cost, what might the time and cost be for doing that? And how can we in Congress help make sure this gets a serious look and testing in the near future? So a lot for a very short time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Let me start with the second question first on locks. We are pursuing locks as a potential solution to the problem. Today, we've got kind of a two-pronged approach. One is to try and identify root cause and then take corrective actions. The other is looking at alerting and protection measures so we can get the T-45s back in the air for flight training. And we're doing those two things in parallel. One is not waiting for the other. Locks is quite honestly, a longer-term solution. We are trying to come up with alert and protection methodologies that would get our students back in the aircraft in the near term. We're talking weeks instead of months that we would be looking at trying to put locks in that aircraft. But we're still pursuing that as an alternative. Given the constraints, I won't talk about the alert and protection devices that we are looking at putting in the aircraft in the near term unless you want to follow up with that. In regards to T-45s and doing the training in other aircraft, we have looked and are continuing to look as this continues to stretch whether or not there are things we can push to the next stage of training in the fleet readiness squadrons. We prefer not to do that, obviously, because it costs more in those fleet jets. We're having our own readiness issues with those fleet aircraft, so putting more workload, more burden of hours in those squadrons is, I won't say a last resort, but it's not something we want to pursue unless we absolutely have to. We have considered using other aircraft, potentially Air Force. I don't think we've talked to the Air Force about that. But one of the key things that we get out of T-45 training is taking our new aviators, our new student naval aviators, to the ship, which we can only do right now in the T-45 or in their next fleet aircraft. One of the challenges is determining what their next fleet aircraft is as they're going through the training syllabus. So we'd have to make those decisions before they completed their normal syllabus.
Admiral, we need you to conclude.
Training. So yes, ma'am, we're looking at all those options, including locks, but again, we're more focused right now on trying to get the T-45s back in the air with alert and protection measures for our student naval aviators.
Thank you.
Mr. Lobriano.
Thank you, General Bunch, for you. The 177th Fighter Wing in my district has Block 30 F-16s that are in urgent need of AESA radar upgrades. Luckily, Phase 1 and 2 of the AESA Joint Urgent Operational Need is now considered fully funded. Additionally, two-year, $243.9 million contract to build 72 radars for the Air Force was just awarded. The contract allows procurement of roughly 450 to 500 radars, and the program of record is set at 300. However, there is no additional pre-block F-16 aircraft in the modernization plan for the radars. I'm concerned that if additional funding is not provided for the pre-block F-16, alert facilities like the one I represent at the 177th will only have 8 uniquely configured aircraft per squadron. In the proposed F-18 budget appears there is a little over $40 million for the F-16 Phase 3 research and development. Could you speak to the need for the future procurement funding for the AESA radars so that the Air Force can upgrade the entire fleet, including the remainder of the pre-block F-16s?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. And you are right. We did award a contract to Northrop Grumman in May. We are starting the program to be on track for what we committed to, which was an IOC of third quarter FY19, and for the 3 units tasked for defending the National Capital Region to have that fully completed by the first quarter of FY21. Our procurement funding for additional aircraft starts, and that's to get the 72 aircraft that you mentioned, sir. Our procurement funding starts in FY20 to address our requirement for 300 more radars. We do have, within the constraints of the contract, the room to grow that based on the numbers that you've said that we have, 450 plus that we could put in that. But right now, that's the money we've got laid in for those procurements, or to buy 300 more.
Okay. Thank you. Yield back.
Ms. Rosen.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Songus. I want to thank all the panelists for being here today. Of course, I represent Southern Nevada. We have Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada Test and Training Range, Creech Air Force Base down south. So I'm concerned about the procurement of the F-35s and, of course, the length of time that it takes, specifically as it relates to Nellis and our red flag training exercises. You know, those exercises, they are critical, those first 10 missions, critical training for our pilots to get out there and be battle ready. So how does this, what are you going to do to maintain a healthy fighter force while you're ramping up with procurement?
Well, ma'am, we will continue. Thank you for that question. Nellis is one of the crown jewels of the U.S. Air Force from the airspace it has provided and all the support that comes from the community. That is our premier Air Force training location for our advanced training, which is perfect for the F-22s that are there and also the F-35s as the fleet grows. So we continue to acquire as many as we can in a year so that we can replace the fleets of older fourth-generation aircraft, hopefully have fewer to modernize in the future, and make sure that we get the training for both fifth-gen primary, but also pushing that training back to our fourth-gen teammates that play there, whether it's in the weapons school effort or in our red flag.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And real quickly, General Davis, thank you very much for your candor over the years. Give us an idea what the F-35 is bringing to you in marine aviation.
Thanks so much for that question. It's an honor to serve. Ma'am, also, too, the Marines are up there at Nellis. We have instructors now integrating with the United States Air Force Fighter Weapons School, both in the test unit up there, and we like going up to the red flag as well, and we like our Air Force and Navy brothers and Army brothers coming down to fly with us down there in Yuma at our weapons school. I'll tell you, the F-35Bs are now forward deployed, and actually they're permanently stationed in Japan, out there at the forward edge of at the tip of the spear. The combatant commander asked for the F-35s to fly in Korea a short while ago as a message to those who would try to do our nation or our allies harm. Fantastic capability. Red Flag Alaska, again, up there as well. What we're finding that this airplane is doing for us, it really is, I think, changing the way that we fight and changing the way we're going to fight for the foreseeable future. The young aviators that are flying the airplane are finding all kinds of things to do with that we didn't even dream of. So it's and we're doing with that airplane, we're going to target areas that we never thought possible before. They see things they didn't see before. They're able to process data, and the kill ratios and the kill rates, both in the air-to-air and the air-to-ground, and all weather. Really, all weather is a thing that we haven't had before. The radar allows you to see through cloud. So when you've got a Marine, a soldier, sailor, airman, or ally that's on the ground that needs fire support, bottom line, having the F-35 out there in numbers, either a staged base to float or base to shore, is going to allow us to provide those high-volume fires, aviation fires, regardless of the threat. It's really an exciting time to be a young person coming in to fly Marine airplanes, Air Force airplanes, Navy airplanes, and then we do have to get the T-45 fixed. So I was down there in Meridian talking to those young sailors and Marines, and they're chomping the bit to get in these new airplanes.
Always love to hear General Davis talk about the F-35, so it's a great advertisement. And I thought you'd give you one last chance. General Harris or General Bunch, the Western ranges I always consider as part of kind of the infrastructure of what we do for air operations, and it is so important, especially with the F-35 and the F-22, because the ranges have to be so much bigger and more expansive. Of course, we can go out to the ocean and things of that nature, but give us an idea of what the Western ranges are to air operations.
Well, sir, the Western test ranges are critical to our test and our training. They're critical to everything that we do, and we have a healthy investment into those to modernize them and make them more capable. We're also making but as you said, given the fifth-gen planes and what they can do, we're now outgrowing some of our ranges to the point that we need more. So we're focusing in also on live virtual constructive to be able to create an environment where we can do those to the threat density we need and everything else. But they are critical. We do see them as a crown jewel. We are investing in them to modernize them, to make them more capable to do what we need. But we're also investing, as those fifth-gen capabilities grow, they're going farther and farther out, and we need to advance those capabilities as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Halloran, and following Mr. Halloran, the next four are Kelly, Gates, Brown, and Bacon. Mr. Halloran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for your service, your family service, and coming before us today. My questions are for Admiral Grosklags and General Bunch. The budget request shows a drop in the production rate in 2018 for an air-to-air missile, the AIM-120D. That is a very high demand, and as we were told by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and Chief of Naval Operations, a critical weapon the Navy and Air Force need many more of right now. Specifically, the request is lower by more than 300 missiles in comparison to projections in last year's budget. Based on the budget, it appears the issue might be some kind of part supplier or part obsolescence problem. Can you explain this reduction in the production rate? Is it due to a lack of funds or some other problem? If Congress were to add funding, could it be used to buy more missiles, or are you limited by where things are with the production line? I understand wanting to limit your budget exposure under the assumption that the F3R delay would limit F-17, fiscal year 17 production quantities, but the redesign effort shows these reductions are premature when we really should be closing the inventory shortfall.
Sir, I'll take the first shot, and I'll let G8 jump in at the end of this. So the driver for why the numbers do go down in the budget, we stay steady in 17, and we do go down in 18 and 19. We go back up. It is tied to the difficulties we're having getting the form, fit, function refresh on schedule and progressing. It's something we continue to work with the company. But what we did was we intentionally laid in a line so that they had the ability to break that into the production without causing a more negative ramp. We actually have looked across our weapons inventories. As many know, we're using a lot of weapons right now. We're looking at what we need to build up. That is actually one that General Harris and I have kind of agreed that's not one we need to try to add dollars to do right now. We need them to get the form, fit, function properly done and get that on track. Then once we get that on track, I'd be willing to come back and ask you for additional help. But I'm not ready to ask for that right now, sir.
You know, from the Department of Navy's perspective, we're in exactly the same place. I think if you look at what we've budgeted for cost of fit-up, which I know is not the issue here today, we've actually maintained the total quantity cost of fit-up, but we did come down in FY 18 and 19 for the exact reasons that General Bunch stated.
So just to clarify, there is an inventory shortfall on these weapons, but you've just decided to...
We would love to buy more, sir, but I need them to get the production right before we buy too many more and I run out of parts on the line and I don't have the ability to produce.
Thank you, and I yield.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Admiral, I understand the Navy's Next Generation Jammer Increment 1 program recently was able to accelerate some of the program's milestones throughout the life of the program. Can you tell us how important the updated jamming capability is to the warfighter, and are there additional efforts to get Increment 1 fielded faster? And I think you're the only vice. I don't do well with names, so.
That's okay, and I'll ask Admiral Miller to jump in if needed. The program just recently passed its milestone B, so they're fully in their development stage at this point. They are on track. We anticipate a milestone C, which is low-rate initial production in 19 and fielding in 21. This is one of former Secretary Kendall's accelerated programs, if you will, and we've been taking advantage of that at every turn. It has significantly less oversight within the building than most of our ACAT-1 programs. And the program, we are trying to accelerate it. We don't currently have any insurmountable technical hurdles, but there are some things we need to work through, particularly with the amount of radiated power we're trying to get out of that pod and the effects that it has on the rest of the aircraft systems when it's radiating. So we plan to start flight test late 18, early 19, and then we'll get a full-up test evaluation of those interference effects.
And then just very briefly, I know that there's $2 billion in Increment 2. The budget shows $2 billion for Increment 2. Does this might take into account any potential cost savings in the overall Increment 2 program if common hardware is used from Increment 1?
It does, but right now we don't anticipate a significant amount of common hardware due to the significantly different frequencies we're dealing with and the location of the pod on the aircraft, and again, mutual interference effects.
And then my next question deals with the MQ-4C Triton. In your testimony, you talk about it. In 2009, the Navy initiated a demonstration program of unmanned maritime ISR using the older model Global Hawk that the Air Force was no longer using. We're still using it, and so in support of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Central Command region. Can you tell us what capabilities the Triton will bring to the fleet and how they are shaped by what you learned from the demonstration?
Well, we continue to fly our BAMS demonstrator, the one aircraft that we have that was considered a 1 or 2 year demonstration program. I think we've had it out there flying CENTCOM now for about 7 years. So we continue to gather data. The biggest changes for the Q4 are in terms of its ability to fly in weather and turbulence conditions that some of its predecessors could not. So we did some significant structural modifications to that aircraft. We are leveraging all the work that the Air Force has done ahead of us in terms of the TCPET, or the communications from that aircraft, the dissemination of the intelligence surveillance information. And as you know, we're quickly going to turn that after at IOCs into a multi-INT sensor. So when we EOC in 18, right behind that in 20, we'll have an initial operational capability for that multi-INT sensor capability.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bunch, thank you to service to the country and also to my district during your time at Eglin Air Force Base. You're aware that the Gulf range is important for the F-35 training mission. You're also aware that the equipment that supports the Gulf range is very old. What importance does the Air Force place on upgrades to the Gulf range so that we can be fully capable with the F-35?
So in my previous position as a test center commander, we created what we needed to do to modernize. Now that path is coming back in, and we're evaluating in our budget priorities. We have invested in some areas there, sir, to grow those capabilities. We know it's critical for what we need to be able to do to have the ranges that we need and the distance that we need to be able to execute things, and there's a lot of good things that can go in there that we're working on.
My next question is for Admiral Grosklags. I have a letter dated May 5th that's signed by Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Tsongas, and myself. It requests the schedule and timeline for tests and evaluations of equipment associated with the T-45, including the equipment being tested, the location of those tests, the frequency of those tests, and how the results of the tests are informing the Navy moving forward. As of today, we've not received that information. Is that typical?
No, sir, it's not. Typically, we try and respond within 10 days to 2 weeks, and I have to apologize for the fact that we haven't gotten that response to you. I know that it's in the process of being sent back over here to the Hill, but I can't give you the exact status or where it sits today.
I'll yield my remaining minute and 40 seconds to the chairman so he could advise as to how I could get this information that's critically important to my constituents.
I think you're doing it. As you know, we're working together on it, and it's great that you've once again raised this issue. I think we'll leave this record open and also make it a continuing obligation for an answer to this hearing. But you know, clearly this is a priority for the committee and Mr. Gates, and we want to see the other request satisfied.
Sir, understand.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here. Yep. Then this question is for Admiral Miller and General Harris. For the last 15 years, there's been a gap in the airborne ISR capabilities, or I should say capacity, and the demand or the need in the field. How do you go about determining what is a acceptable or optimal level of support? What is the aspirational goal? Where should we be? And what's the in the 2.5 minutes left? What's the plan to get us there?
Well, earlier we talked about the Triton, MQ-4 Triton, and I'll tell you, it's going to be a game changer. We've been flying the one BAMS demonstrator, the Broad Area Maritime Surveillance Demonstrator in 5th Fleet. Now we're talking about orbits worldwide with the Triton, with the extra sensors that it's going to provide, as well as the multi-INT capability that, as Admiral Grosklags said, will arrive later in 20. So what this will be able to provide to the theater commanders, to the fleet commanders, and contribute to basically all the forces that are in its AOR that it'll be operating, I think will be significant.
Thank you, sir. That's a great question. We always try and provide everything to the warfighter, but the demand has been somewhat insatiable. So in our effort to make sure that we are providing a long-term capability, we have frozen our medium altitude ISR at 60 lines with the intent of getting the team healthy so that we can surge if required for the future. On that line, though, we continue to make improvements, and we are changing from the MQ-1 to an all MQ-9 fleet to give us better capability and capacity for both ISR and combat employment. In addition, in an unclassified format, upgrading the sensors on that particular weapon system. We also have high altitude ISR that we continue to provide, and we are looking at recapping our big wing ISR, which will help focus our medium altitude ISR into more important areas and be on target much faster.
Great. Unrelated follow-up at Joint Base Andrews, where I represent. The question was already asked about the radar system, and certainly with that important mission, Homeland Defense and respond to emergencies around the National Capital Region. We're looking forward to a timely delivery of those radars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Bacon.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I want to recognize General Davis's service. You were great to work with in the current capacity, but also when you were at Cyber Command. We have the best air power in the world, but it's been put under a lot of strain with continuing resolutions, the BCA caps, and we owe you better, and I hope we do that. I have a couple questions on ISR and EW. First, a comment. I appreciate the fact that we're funding the U2 program in conjunction with the Global Hawk. I think we need both, and there's a lot of unmet ISR needs out there, so I applaud that, commend it. Question with the E8 program. I think we have a lot of unmet GMTI requirements out there, and I think we have a good plan for the recap or modernization. Do we have a shortage in funding, though, when it comes to the legacy E8 as we transition? Because I'm under the impression we do. I just was hoping you'd comment.
So I don't believe we have a shortfall there in funding. What I have is a shortfall in the ability to get them in the air and have them available to support the mission. So the aircraft are old, and the aircraft have diminishing, well, not so much diminishing, they're having higher downtime for heavy maintenance, and we've not been able to get as many of them in the air. It's taken longer to get them through the depot. So what we are looking at is how do we work with the contractor to do the depots in a more timely manner to increase the number of aircraft that are available with this high demand, low density target set we have. And the other item we're doing to make sure that we fill the gap until we get the recap effort going. We're doing service life studies in a variety of areas. We did one on the fuselage that extended the life out more. And our intent is to ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep that aircraft viable until we get the recap done so we can meet the combatant commander's requirements.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question. On the F-35, it has incredible sensors on board, and I think we have a plan right now to do the links with the wingman. But I see there's a gap, and I don't see where we're meeting that gap of getting that information off the F-35s back to home station while they're flying so that the follow-on missions will get that information faster. Do we have a plan or a thought process how we're going to try to transition or get a plan where we can get this incredible data off the F-35 back more quickly so we can use it?
I can correct that, sir. We're doing some experiments with that right now. One, in conjunction with the Navy, the missionary data
General,
link.
I'm going to ask if you would submit the answer to that for the record, and we're going to take it that it's yes, but the detailed response we're going to ask for you to submit to us, if you could submit that quickly. I'm going to go to Mr. Banks with everybody's approval for 2 minutes, and then we're going to close out with Ms. McSally, who's going to ask a question that the answer is going to be for the record. So, Mr. Banks, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant General Harris, first of all, I commend you for your work in the President's budget to fully fund the A-10 weapons system. It has been and continues to be a great asset to our Air Force and is of significant importance to my district in Northeast Indiana, which is the proud home of the Indiana's Air Guard's 122nd Fighter Wing. As you certainly know, over the past few years, this wing has been slated to convert their mission from the A-10 to the F-16. Yet yesterday in the Senate, Secretary Wilson stated, quote, "The A-10 is at Fort Wayne and we have no intention of removing it. It's there for the foreseeable future and they'll have that manned combat mission," end quote. You stated in your testimony that the transition away from the system will occur in 2030. So my question is, how do you see that transition occurring for current squadrons, particularly those wings in our National Guard, and will they then utilize F-16s? Would they transition directly from the A-10 to the F-35. How do you see that transition occurring?
Well, we are committed to flying the A-10 weapon system and continuing to work through the upgrades to that as we're required to, and with the NDAA to compare for the F-35 CAS comparison task that we have. Our intent is to fly that weapon system as long as we can, because we've made cuts in the A-10, the F-16, and pretty much all of our conventional fighters based on our budget. So if we had an unlimited budget, we would keep everything we have and just continue to grow an F-35 fleet. At 48 to 60 F-35s a year, we will be retiring some of our older airplanes and putting newer airplanes or more capable airplanes into these units. Right now, the plan continues to be that, and we'll address this, that as we reduce some of the A-10 capability that has been approved, it'll be either with F-35s or with the F-16 for the weapon system.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentlemen, many people have additional questions. They're going to submit those to you for the record. I'm going to ask that you submit your answers within 10 days of receipt of them in writing. I have two members who are going to ask their questions for the record here now and not receive a response, but a written response from you. And it's Martha McSally, and then Mr. Langevin will be asking, and they're going to have 2 minutes.
And as usual, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have questions about the A-10. So in your testimony, you say you're committed to maintaining a minimum of 6 A-10 combat squadrons through 2030, with at least 171 combat-coded A-10s and 283 in the fleet, which we continually hear protect every year. That's 9 squadrons that we currently have. The A-10s are now, as you know, on the DMZ in South Korea. They're kicking butt against ISIS. They're deploying with the European Reassurance Initiative. I was over in Estonia. They're welcoming them to come back anytime soon with the Russian aggression there. From my view and my experience, if we need that capability into a proven tested replacement comes along, 9 squadrons is the absolute minimum. So I really would like to know, I think this is the first time you guys have publicly said, although I have a pretty good intel sources with my buds in the A-10 community, but it's the first time you've publicly said that you're going to go down to 6 squadrons. I'd really like to know what those planning assumptions are of the 6 squadrons. That could be as soon as the testing and evaluation is done, so that could be in a few years from now. What are your planning assumptions? Are they 24 PAA squadrons? Which squadrons are going away? Where's the AX program, which we don't see in your testimony at all? How does this all fit together? So again, a lot of questions on your assumptions here for this critical capability, and I look forward to hearing your responses on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Last question, Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our witnesses, and thank you for your service. General Harris, tactical data links are critical to mission success, forming the core communication network that transmit the common operating picture, shared situational awareness, distributed sensor data for fusion, and integrated fire control across fighters, bombers, and surface ships. However, significant gaps remain in the tactical fighter networks that prevent the Air Force and other services from maximizing the combat utility of their aircraft, specifically secure communication between the F-22 and the F-35 in an A2AD environment. General Playas, the director of the F-35 integration recently stated there's currently nothing on the books for any testing to solve this issue between 5th-generation aircraft. What is the Air Force doing to address the problem of these 2 aircraft communicating during a penetrating strike or counter-air mission? And then for all of our witnesses, while unmanned aircraft systems provide strategic ISR and combat capabilities, I also believe that these systems have the potential to be used for humanitarian operations in disaster areas abroad, particularly when it comes to mapping, lightweight essential item delivery, damage assessment support, and increased situational awareness. How is the Department using unmanned aircraft systems in support of humanitarian missions abroad, and will modernization efforts support these disaster relief and humanitarian operations, and what more can be done to advance this concept?
Thank you, Mr. Langevin. And if you could leave the written copy of that question so that they can have it behind, so we don't have any delay in them receiving it. I look forward to your written answers within 10 days, and as we've stated before, we have votes in the House floor, so because of that, we'll be adjourned.